When you think of Rugby League State of Origin, you think of our guest on Quarter Time today. Wally Lewis, thanks for joining us. State of Origin time, is this the time of the season where you suddenly wish you could put the boots back on?
Warren, I think you've got to be realistic about it. You'd love to be out there, but you look at yourself in the mirror and realise you're 20 years past it. But it's a time that I think you never forget. Doesn't matter whether you go as a commentator or just a supporter sitting in the crowd. You always remember the times, good and bad, on the field, and you like to be able to share those moments, I suppose, with a lot of the guys that go there, the ex-Origin players. It's always a lot of fun. Still
lobbying for the job as team bus driver?
I don't think that I'll ever get that job again. I was disqualified from the position, I believe, never to get the job ever again. But I think if Tosser Turner got a manager's job, I might be a chance.
Now, 33 tests for Australia, 29 State of Origin games. You captained both Australia and Queensland. Do you feel comfortable with the fact that in many ways you probably will be remembered as a Queensland hero rather than an Australian legend?
I think so, but in all honesty, I don't think that's going to worry me too much in the long run. If there's a nice way to earn disliking from a southern crowd, I think it's by winning State of Origin matches. And I was always, a little bit upset with treatment running onto the Sydney Cricket Ground. The incident I'm talking about is the first test in 1984.
As Australian captain?
Yeah, my proudest moment. First game as Australian captain, and got booed onto the ground. They actually clapped the poms on. And I thought, well, that's about the end of it for me. It didn't ever worry me too much after that. I thought, well, I'm just going to look after myself here. And when we used to go down there, I'd probably put in another 10% just to make sure that I'd remind people that we were a little bit better at State of Origin level.
For most sportsmen, winning is the motivation. What was the motivation, or was the motivation different when you went on the field for Australia compared to with the Queensland jersey on?
I don't think so. I believe that I always played the game with the same passion. I grew up with a dream, I suppose, of being able to play first-grade football. I was like every other kid in the block. Whenever I talk to people, about a career, I always use the word fortunate because I believe it's played a huge part in my life. I came from a sporting family. My dad gave me a chance. I had very good bringing into the game. But when I got into first-grade football, I think I'd watched Queensland getting belted for 15 or 20 years. I didn't like it. A lot of the other guys around certainly didn't appreciate it as well. And my dad always used to say to me, if you're going into a game, just give yourself a couple of easy things to remember in the game. I managed to do that, which led to playing for Australia. And if there's any one sad thing in the game today, it's that a lot of people regard State of Origin football as the pinnacle rather than Test football. To me, to represent your country in an international level has got to be, and always should be, the best that you should ever try to achieve.
So there was a bit of a revenge or hatred factor when you stuck on the maroon jersey?
Oh, I think there was, but it was never too much against the New South Wales players. I guess it was against the crowd more so than the players themselves. I was probably backing up alongside those players quite often 7 days later to take part in a test match, so you could never get offside with too many of the blokes. As to trying to sit the crowd in their bum, well and sure, we used to like doing that, and that when the guys had a drink, I can remember a couple of times, two incidents that I probably enjoyed more than anything else was going into the city in Sydney after winning a series in 1987, and it absolutely stunned the people in Sydney. I looked at people that wanted to abuse me, wanted to throw things at me, but they really couldn't because they knew that Queensland had won that night, and it really upset them. And in a couple of years later, 1989, we played a game, and we ended the game, I think, with 11 players on the football field. We had blokes run off with broken parts to them. Mal broke his cheekbone, Fatty broke his leg, I think. Alf broke his leg. They had them all over the park. And at the end of that match, Queensland walked off the field. We'd won the game, and effectively the series, and the New South Wales public gave us a standing ovation off the field, and I'll never ever forget that. I think it's the first time it happened, and probably will be the last.
So that's an example of one very memorable moment for you. Any other games or moments on the field that you particularly cherish?
Oh, I think so. When I'm asked about it, I've got to put my first game for Australia. I probably knew how much it was going to mean to me. You've got to look back, I think, in future years to realise just how much impact it had on your life, but I knew how much that it meant to my parents. I looked at my dad, and he'd basically been the unsung hero all the way through. He never tried to ram too much down my throat as a football player, because as a coach he probably knew that he was best there to advise players and to offer them opportunities. If they went wrong, then to try and correct it rather than telling them they were wrong full time about it. And I think when I saw tears in his eyes, and he was a bit of a hard-style bloke, that it was one of those moments that I wasn't ever going to forget either. And probably a match in England, the last game of the 1986 Kangaroo Tour. We'd wrapped up the series. I think Mel's wife had a baby the night before, and a few of the guys had helped celebrate it, and we were struggling a bit. And towards the end of the game, I managed to score a try there, and there was a couple of guys that I really needed to call on in that game, and they were Peter Sterling, Brett Kenny, and Gene Miles in particular, and Royce Simmons. And Royce helped set up the try. I basically said to him to do something. He did it, and did it perfectly, and gave me a bit of an uninterrupted run to the line. I got the pats on the back, but it was really, you know, a team effort that was deserved. But I've got to say that it's a moment that I'll never ever forget, because it had special moments for me.
You were acknowledged as an inspirational leader by your teammates, but when you're starting out in club football, apparently the opposition teams would put it on you. They believed that maybe your ticker wasn't up to scratch, so they were testing you out.
Yeah, I found that out in later years, I suppose. It was something that I didn't understand a real lot about. There used to be a little bit more go on in the game of football in those days about it, and Ross Strudwick was the A-grade coach at Valleys in my second year there. The first year John Rhodes was there, and the pair of them, the Rat and Rhodes, basically said, I don't want to see your head in the first 15 minutes. Just get out of the way. It's up to the other blokes to belt and bash each other for a little while, have a bit of fun, then we'll call you into it. And I think that may have started the other part of it a little while later. I mean, I certainly had no problems with the rough stuff a little bit later on. You know, if guys wanted to mix it on the football field, well then fine. I mean, I don't ever pretend that I was a great fighter on the field, but I also probably pride myself a little bit in saying that I don't think I ever took too many backward steps. Sometimes it was probably not the right thing to do at the time.
Would you admit that you were always cocky?
To start with, yeah, very. And I learned off a very good bloke again, and I don't think it's any surprise to hear who it was. It probably took me 2 years to get away from that. I mean, I used to shoot my mouth off every opportunity.
Who are we talking about?
I think, you know, a certain little halfback that was playing there. It was a case that I pretty much followed his role. I'd seen him do it fairly successfully. I started to do it. I thought I had some success in it. I probably did, but what I didn't have success in was making friends. And at the end of the game, I used to watch all my teammates having a beer with opponents, but there weren't too many that were all that keen to have a drink with me. I knew that I had to try and change that around. I don't think the coach enjoyed it too much, but I think I got a lot of friends back. I switched clubs, and I think that was probably the best thing for me to do.
When did you first hear the title, the King, or the Emperor of Lang Park?
It was put on by a certain New South Wales player, and it was just prior to a State of Origin game, I think in 1984, not 83 or 84, I'm not sure which one it was. And it was a question put to this bloke about how they were going to handle Wally Lewis at his home paddock, and it was Ray Price who turned around and said, well, why have we got to worry about handling him? He's like the weather, he's soft and cold. He dead set thinks he's king up there. And it stuck. That title stuck for a long time. I remember saying to Pricey during that game, and he was skipper of the match, and we ended up flogging them, and it was a situation very close to the try line, where I was dummy half, and I looked up and I saw who was straight in front of me, who the bloke was that was going to deny me a try or effectively let me through. And I thought, well, it's too good an opportunity to let go. And I just sort of dived through underneath him, put the ball down, and I said, thanks, Pricey. And as I walked away, I turned around and I said, very soft, that tackle. And I said, it's getting cold for you blokes. And he sort of just shook his head at me. I mean, we get on fairly well now. That's not much of a problem.
Did you enjoy the fame of being the King, or was it a love-hate?
Probably a bit of both. It certainly opened some doors for me. I've never been stupid enough to deny that it's been a huge bonus for me along the way. But there have been occasions where it has been a bit of a problem for me. I got regarded or tagged as a bloke that didn't like a lot of attention around me after a while, and I didn't deny that I used to get short-tempered with a lot of people, and I used to feel most of the time that I had quite the right to, if it was invading my own privacy, and the situation came up. And I was at a restaurant one night having a feed with Jackie, and I hadn't married her at that stage. We were just going out, and we were sitting down to have something to eat, and she'd walked away, and a bloke came up and just threw this book over my shoulder, and it landed on my plate. And he said, hurry up and sign that, it's for the kid. And I turned around and looked at him. He said, hurry up, I want to get out of here. And I rolled it up and told him what he could do with the envelope that was rolled up. And he said, I knew you'd be like that, I knew you'd be arrogant. And I said, well, if that's the case, well, I'll take it. But I used to I loved the time with the kids. I used to make sure that when I was in Sydney, particularly with the Broncos, after a game that I always stayed on the football field to sign autographs for the kids. It used to take me half an hour to get off. And that got cut short one day at Cronulla. A bloke came up and he hit me over the back of the head with a bottle and split my head open. So I thought, well, that's about it. He'd spoil it for the young blokes, and it's probably a good idea for my own safety to get off.
Did you realise the influence and the power you had? I mean, if you'd said to 20,000 people, come on, we're going to march on state parliament, there was a chance that 15,000 would have turned up.
I think that became more apparent as time grew on. It was pretty much directed at me at one stage when the first rumblings of a Brisbane-based team playing in the Sydney competition were mooted. Ron McAuliffe basically said to me, I want you to come and meet a bloke, want to talk to him, and it was all about putting a case forward for us having a team in the Sydney comp. I read in the paper the next day that I demanded, that there was a team that should be in the Sydney competition, and I was aligning myself alongside Ron McAuliffe, along with this bloke from Western Australia who was involved in a clothing manufacturer, that we were going to be the ones that had to get the job. And then suddenly another bloke aligned himself and got Gene Miles involved, and somebody got Bob Linder, and it became stupid after that. And I got a little bit disappointed with Ron McAuliffe at the time, probably the only time I ever disagreed with the bloke, because he was a wonderful influence, I think. But there were other occasions, and I think the only time that it really stood out more after that was when I got the bullet from the Broncos. I remember a bloke went and drove his Mack truck up to the front door of the Broncos and parked it outside, and he said he wasn't going to move it until somebody spoke to him about it. No one was going to get in or out.
Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time, and there's a lot of other things I'd like to ask Wally, so we'll continue with The King and I next week on Quarter Time.
Home wins.
Recognised as the best rugby league player of his era, Wally Lewis did have some less regal moments. Sacked from the captaincy at the Broncos in 1990 and then shown the door. Let's rejoin Wally Lewis Part 2 on Quarter Time.
3 years after becoming the first player to sign with the newly established team, Lewis is finished with the Broncos. The announcement was made by General Manager John Rebo. He said salary cap restrictions meant the Brisbane team could not continue paying Lewis $150,000 a year after upgrading other contracts.
I suppose we've dug a bit of a grave for ourselves because we've paid Wally a good salary, and the league now won't allow that salary to come down. They're maintaining that cap on his head.
Late this afternoon, Lewis went public, claiming he thought negotiations were still underway to keep him.
I'm very disappointed about the club's decision not to go ahead any further with negotiations for next year. It's quite easily the most disappointing moment of my life.
Wayne Bennett, who admits he's clashed with Lewis this year, says the King was offered a new contract but wouldn't agree to terms.
Yeah, we offered him a reduced rate. He obviously can't see his way fit to play under that at that scale, and we have to make our decision on what's best for the club as well. So, I mean, he made a business decision, obviously. We've made one.
In the end, they said, yeah, we do want you, but here's the money. And I looked at Billy and I said, look, that's a nice way of saying, see you later.
When I got the bullet from the Broncos, I remember a bloke went and drove his Mack truck up to the front door of the Broncos and parked it outside. And he said he wasn't going to move it until somebody spoke to him about it. No one was going to get in or out.
Well, if these sort of things can happen, did you ever lose your grip on reality?
I probably did for a little while in the early years, particularly, the first couple. I got myself associated with a couple of blokes that were a lot older than me in the club, after the first 2 years, and guys that I've always...
This is the Broncos?
No, sorry, this was at the Valleys Club in Brisbane, and they were the guys that I used to respect their opinion. The two blokes were guys called Ian Summer and Peter O'Callaghan, and I'm still involved with Cal in a pub business at the moment. And I used to listen to the way they talked, their own opinions on different blokes, and I took a lot out of their opinions and beliefs, and probably settled down a little bit. But there were occasions where people used to say, you've lost the plot and you've done this on the football field, but I used to try and say to some of them, like, a lot of people don't understand the way you've got to try and change the course of an action on the football field that may be necessary to perhaps change the course of the match itself. And I think that happened quite a number of occasions. If people were disappointed in the way that I did that, well, apologies, but I did it for a particular reason, and that was to win a football game.
Play until just after half-time was pretty stereotyped, with both sides making plenty of errors, and the crowd started to disapprove referee Mick Stone's decisions. And when this ugly incident occurred, they got restless.
And the blue's on. It's all on now. Martin Bella taking out his frustrations.
When he had the hide to send the king off, they erupted.
You'll get five. He's given him 5 for back chat. This is a sensation. Mick Stone has stopped the match, and rightly so. And the bottom line is, can this game be restarted?
While the incident was bad, Wally Lewis feels it helped his team.
I know everybody on our side didn't agree with the decision, and maybe that was the decision that finally got them going.
A row has erupted over the performance of ref Greg McCallum, who Queensland claim cost them the game. With 7 minutes to go, McCallum awarded New South Wales a penalty that not only broke the 6-all deadlock, but also Queensland's spirit.
Oh, mate, I can't say too much. I'll get fined all over the joint here.
Lewis claims McCallum didn't ask Lazarus to play the ball, and Langer was penalised unfairly. The subsequent 2 points sealed the match. Like most of the New South Wales forward pack, Geyer was under plenty of pressure to perform, and that he did.
Queensland, brushing them aside.
Tempers eventually erupted after this charge from Geyer on Hoff.
Geyer went in with the left elbow in the direction of the head of Paul Hoff. And that's how it started, quite definitely.
Then, just before half-time, another brawl.
The end of the first half.
It resulted in Geyer and Lewis being taken aside. That too proved hostile.
Says something to Geyer, they push and shove.
Your career's littered with lots of controversies. You're in plenty of strife and plenty of stinks. I mean, you know, the Mark Geyer incident, the can riot, missing out on the Kangaroo Tour because of your broken arm. The list goes on and on. When you look back on it, which sticks in your mind or sticks in your throat the most?
I can't separate those 3 that you mentioned. There was probably another half a dozen that you could throw in. But those 3, I mean, the Geyer thing, I went running in. I never threw a punch. I pushed a bloke backwards, got involved in a push and shove with Geyer. We basically had heard, 2 days prior to the match what was going to happen. I asked the referee. He said nothing was going to go ahead. If it did, well, then there would be action taken. And everyone saw that there wasn't action taken. I mean, Paul Hoff almost got his head knocked off in the second half. And I felt genuine concern for Guy himself after the match, because I got to speak to the bloke, and he basically said, yeah, we've been told that it was open slather, do what you want. Well, it was in the game, but then they turned around and they gave him the cuts the next week. They suspended him for a whole pile of weeks. And he was the unfortunate target. I mean, I had to go out there. I got involved. It may have gone a little bit too long, just prior to half-time, but I pretty much felt that we had to stand up for ourselves. I said 3 words, you and dog were first and third, and there was no guess as to the other. But I thought that we really need to stand up for ourselves for that one.
Would you say in general terms, though, did you go looking for a fight when it came to controversy?
I don't think I got in too many fights. I was in another one at Lang Park.
No, but I mean controversy. Not, did you come out swinging when anyone had a different opinion to you? Or?
No, I was pretty open to that. They were certainly entitled to their opinion. But I learned a thing from Ron McCall. He said to me at one stage, he said, don't let people down south or anyone else tell you that they're any better or that you're any worse because you come from Queensland. He said, you've got to demand from them that there's got to be equal rights. I think that got progressively better as it went through.
Next, Lewis was dropped as Australian captain and had to stay at home while his teammates left on an Ashes tour after he failed a fitness test. Wally's response was hardly sportsmanlike.
It doesn't seem to matter what I do to prove my fitness here. I know I'm fit, and everybody else that's seen me except one bloke knows that I'm fit.
I'm not saying that they're taking a particular stance, and I'm not accusing them of lying, but obviously you're trying to get me to say, oh yes you are, you're trying to get me to say that 2 doctors are lying. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying up here at the same time that I know a doctor has passed me fit. I know that he's been backed up by another couple of doctors up here. Are you saying that they're telling lies?
No, but what you did say was that the league had set you up. You seem to be implying that they deliberately want to exclude you from the team, and what I'm trying to work out is why would they do that? You're a great player. Why would they exclude a great player from their team deliberately if it wasn't for sound reasons?
Well, if you can find the answer out, come back and tell me, because that's exactly the thing I've been trying to find out as well.
The other couple of incidents that you mentioned, I suppose that you can look back at them and try and wonder, were all of them necessary on the way through? The Kangaroo Tour one, I'll still stand by my word there.
Well, you alleged a conspiracy at the time.
I spoke to Ken Arthurson, and I mentioned that a bloke had told me there was never any denial that the bloke, the ARL guy, had said to me, 2 weeks prior to the tour, that I wasn't going on the tour. He never denied it once, and I was called to go to Sydney. The ARL demanded an explanation from me. I walked in the room, and Ken Arthurson, and I always get along terrific with Ken, he said to me his first words were, "Was it?" and then mentioned the bloke's name. And I said, well, why did you fly me down? You brought me 1,000 kilometres down here, and I said, you know who it was to start with. And he said, had he been drinking? And I thought, well, bingo. Well, I said, well, what am I doing here? You know he said it. You've told me about it. He's obviously told you. Yet I'm the one that's getting into trouble over it.
Said what?
And he said that I wasn't going on the tour.
Right.
And it was quite open on it. And I went home. The next day, Arco brought out in the paper, it said that I'd apologised and withdrawn all claim on what happened. I never did. And I rang Arco back and denied it again. But it never made print after that matter.
Well, it's good to see you can still get angry, because generally you seem to have mellowed a little in the last couple of years. Do you feel that yourself?
Oh, I think it's natural. Getting out of the sport itself and taking on another role, which is just as tough, I suppose, in parenthood.
Commentator.
I think there's times in parenthood where I probably grit my teeth a lot more than I did when I was playing football. And my dad, he just looks at me and just shakes his head and said, you got to remember when you were that age, though. And I turn around and I say, well, I suppose I do. Yeah, I've got to be fair, but I also remember what you were like when I was that age, and you didn't not grit your teeth too many times. No doubt I've settled down a little bit, but there's still plenty of things that I refuse to back down over, and I don't think that I should have to. Maybe I go a little bit overboard on some of them, but I think there's probably a few occasions where people say far too much on issues, but if it's a subject that's pertinent to what you're being accused of, well, I don't think you can run away too far from that.
Your farewell in '91 after your last State of Origin match at Lang Park was an emotional occasion. In fact, the dramatic announcement 10 minutes before the end of the game, this in fact was your last game, which I think you'd organised that be done that way. And you said on that occasion, one of the reasons was that you had a little girl to look after, Jamie Lee, your daughter, who you'd found out was profoundly deaf. How has all that worked out now, and what influence has that had on your life?
Well, that settled me down pretty quick at that stage, and just in response to that, I remember the next day reading or hearing about an article in a Sydney paper that said what a stage this is, and I'd pleaded with the press to leave it alone. I'd found out my daughter was deaf the day before. I didn't want that publicised. One bloke did. Wally's girl deaf, I think was the headline. They were the 3 words on the front of the paper. And I thought, well, you low mongrel, you can't get any worse than that. You won't even leave a young kid alone. I had the decision to make, I think, in the space of 10 minutes before the game. I hadn't even spoken about it before that. I walked up to the manager, Tosser Turner. I said, Toss, this is it. I said, I never ever thought I'd run away from State of Origin football. I said, but I got a little kid to look after now, and she's got a problem. And Dick turned around, he looked at me and he said, well, if you didn't tell me that, he said, I would have told you at the end of the game. That's what you were supposed to do. At the end of the game, I wanted to get the opportunity to take my boys onto the football field and walk them around there and give them a chance to feel the emotion of one of the great sporting grounds of the world. I thought we had two in Australia, Lang Park and the Sydney Cricket Ground, and it was Queensland's biggest bonus when they stopped playing football at the SCG. They lost the whole emotion of the place when they went over the road. But I wanted my sons to be able to walk around there, and they did. I think they were the real sufferers for quite some time when I was away on long tours and interstate camps and that sort of things. I just wanted them to be able to see what it was like to stand out in the middle of that. And again, as I say, at the end of it, I remember reading about a bloke that, the guy that said that I'd set it up, it was like a complete stage scene. And then the whole thing was almost like a setup.
Well, Wally, Rugby League and certainly State of Origin wouldn't have been the same without you. In fact, State of Origin might not have still existed now without you. Thanks for joining us on Quarter Time.
My pleasure, Warren.